You may be seated. In the words of Ecclesiastes from the Bible, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Joe's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. Psalm 15, Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai, mi yagur ba'ohalecha, mi yishkon bahar kodshecha, Holech tamim ufoel tzedek v'dover emet bilvavo. Lo ragal al eshono, lo asa l're'ehu ra'a v'cherpa lo nasa al krovo. Nivzeh be'enav nim'as ve'et yirei Adonai yechabed. Nishpa lahara v'lo yamir kaspo lo natan b'neshech v'shochad al naki lo lakach. Ose ele lo yimot le'olam. Do we deserve to enter God's sanctuary? Can we merit a place in the presence of God? Live with integrity, do what is right, speak the truth without deceit, have no slander upon your tongue, do no evil to others, do not mistreat your neighbor. Spurn a contemptible person, but honor those who revere the Lord. Never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates, accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own, then shall you stand firm forever. And from Psalm 103, Kerachem av al banim richam Adonai al yerei av, ki hu yada yitzreinu zachur, ki afar anachnu. Enosh kechatzir yamav ketzitz sadeh ken yatzitz, ki ruach avrabo ve'enenu velo yakirenu od mekomo. V'chesed Adonai me'olam v'yad olam al yereiav, v'tzidkato livnei vanim. As a father has compassion for his children, God has compassion for those who show reverence. God knows how we are fashioned. God remembers that we are dust. The days of mortals are like grass. We flourish as the flowers of the field. A wind passes over them and they are no more, and no one can recognize where they grew. But God's compassion is everlasting. God's kindness to children's children, to all the reverent ones, endures age after age, unchanging. A few members of the family will have words of eulogy to share with us, and we begin with Joe's grandchildren, Natalie and Ronan, to share a poem.
Papa, you are our steady guide, a source of strength, our constant pride. With every laugh, your love was clear, a precious gift we hold so dear.
You taught us lessons big and small, to stand up strong, to never fall. With stories told in your gentle tone, you made us feel we weren't alone.
In every moment, big or small, your love surrounded us all. Your hugs were home, your smile a song. In your embrace we all belonged.
Though now we part, we'll keep you near, in every memory, every tear. Your spirit lives in what we do, our hearts forever tied to you.
So Papa, rest. Your work is done, your love will shine in everyone. For a love like yours will never fade, a legacy of joy you made.
We'll call on The three children, first Heather.
Thank you all for being here today to honor my dad, Joe. It means so much to our family to have so many people who loved him gathered here. Okay, that's okay. Joe was honestly the best man I've ever known. He was a steady presence, who loved me unconditionally, supported me endlessly, and showed me what it truly meant to be a family. Family meant everything to him, and it showed. He was the kind of person who always put others first, who made sure that no matter what happened, his loved ones were taken care of. He never needed to say much, but when he did, it was always thoughtful, meaningful, and exactly what you needed to hear. Or it was a corny joke or a silly song, which was also just as well. But he didn't need grand gestures to show how much he cared. His actions spoke volumes. Some of my best memories with him are simple ones, like stopping at Bob's Big Boys for breakfast on the way to school. It was just the two of us, but we didn't need much else. Food, each other, and the kind of conversation that left me feeling loved and understood, even at such a young age. I always knew that no matter what, he loved me and would be there for me. And there were some tough times for us, especially in my teens and early 20s, when despite everything I had put him through, his support never wavered. There were some big memories too, like traveling to other states and countries, our father-daughter dance at my wedding, and the birth of my son, Ronan. Joe was there for every single part of my life, big or small, and I will always be grateful for that. I honestly don't know how I would have gotten by without it. He was also an amazing grandfather. I can't see through my tears. His face would light up when Natalie and Ronan were around, and you could see how much joy they brought him. I'm so glad that Ronan and I could be there with him every day, and that Ronan got to spend so much time with his papa. We would watch the letter show, which is Wheel of Fortune. And Joe was perfectly okay with Ronan solving most of the puzzles before him, because he was just happy to be spending time together. He was so proud of his grandkids, which I'm sure anyone who was friends with him on Facebook already knows. And I know they will carry that love with them for the rest of their lives. We're gonna miss him so much. But even though he's no longer physically here, I know he'll always be with us. In the way we love and care for one another, in the meals we share, in the laughter and memories we keep alive. Thank you for being my dad, even though you didn't have to. I love you.
And Jackie?
Okay. I should have brought my glasses. Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today to honor Joe's memory. For those who don't know me, I'm Joe's other daughter, Jackie, and I wanted to share a few thoughts and memories with you about my dad. Joe had a lot of passions. Computers and technology, cooking and entertaining, traveling to new places, and music, from Fiddler on the Roof to Katie Lang, and everything in between. All of these passions influenced me as I grew up, and I can truly say that I am who I am today because of Joe. As a kid, we always had the latest technology at home, whether it was our Apple IIe, Prodigy Internet, or the first portable CD player that was the size of a brick. According to Mom, when Joe came home with the newest thing, she'd say, "Don't you already have one of those?" And his response would be, "Well, I did, but I gave it to Jackie." So that's how he justified getting all the newest toys. Joe was the first one you'd call if you had any technology problem. The reason I learned so much about computers is because he wouldn't just fix the problem. He'd explain what happened and why, so that next time I'd be able to fix it on my own. After that Apple IIe in the 80s, Joe only used PCs, so I take pride in the fact that I finally got him to switch to Apple, and once he got his first MacBook Pro, that was it. Although Joe was an amazing chef, he was so much more than that. He truly loved creating experiences for people. Offering to cater an event for someone was Joe's way of showing how much he cared. In elementary school, when we had an end-of-year party, Joe didn't just bring in a fruit salad. He brought in a whole watermelon that he had hollowed out, carved into a whale, filled back up with fruit, and added baby's breath to the whale's blowhole. He was always catering some event or another for friends and family, entertaining at our house, or throwing a tailgate out of the back of his van. I began helping Joe cater at a young age and learned tricks like how to use your knuckles to fan out napkins and how to properly display food on a platter using decorative kale or doilies. It was all these little details that made everything Joe did so special. Unfortunately for me, while the details may have been little, nothing Joe ever made was small. Because of Joe, I am incapable of making anything for less than 50 people. All I ever knew was how to make a Costco-sized Caesar salad with 15 pounds of salmon on a 3-foot platter. I was always so proud of what Joe could do that I would often volunteer him to cater or make food for an event. Let's be honest, we all probably did that once or twice. But my favorite part was always doing it with him. Just like with fixing computers, he showed me how to make his signature dishes, my favorite being melted brie with Chambord and raspberries, and how to set up tables for serving. Planning parties and menus became a special bond between me and Joe, and even in recent years when he wasn't able to stand with me at the stove, I always brought a spoon to him and asked him to taste my food as I was cooking. More salt, more acid, not enough spice. That's what he taught me, not to follow a recipe, but to follow my instincts and keep tinkering and retasting until I got it right. Whenever I made something special or new, I had to bring over extras for Joe to try. Only Joe, because I knew no one else in the house would try it. He would always give me honest feedback so that I could continue to improve my cooking or baking if something wasn't exactly right. I will miss having a taste tester I could always count on. I will also miss seeing the smile spread across Joe's face when he tried my food and really liked it. I could also tell by looking at his face when something was just okay and needed more work. Seeing him smile brought everyone so much joy. Joe also brought his love of music to our family. My sister and I went to more Peter, Paul and Mary, Arlo Guthrie, Pete Seeger, and Three Dog Night concerts at Wolf Trap than your average under 10 crowd. It's true. Joe's CD and record collection was also extensive, and when I was a teenager, he wasn't very happy when he'd open up a CD to listen to it, and the CD was missing. It was probably in my room somewhere. Even when there was no music playing, Joe would sing a song such as Time Goes By, or I Left My Heart in San Francisco, while dancing with us and twirling Heather and I around. We saw musicals on stage and loved to watch old musicals on VHS. One of my favorites to watch with Joe when I was little was Brigadoon. Sharing a love of music and musicals is something that he was able to carry on to my daughter Natalie, his first grandchild, who decided to call him Papa. Just a couple years ago, Joe, my mom, Natalie, and I were able to go see Les Mis at the Kennedy Center. It was so wonderful to watch Natalie get to experience the same thing with her papa as I did with him when I was her age. Beyond technology, cooking, and music, Joe was an amazing person, dad, husband, papa, and friend. He always knew how to make you laugh, even when you didn't want to, and made you feel seen and heard. As a teenager, I might also have been a little difficult, but Joe always made me feel like he understood where I was coming from, and he truly listened to me. He may not have said a lot, but when he did, it was insightful and just the right thing to say at that moment. I strive every day to be as good a parent to my daughter as Joe was to me, and I hope that I've made him proud. I find comfort in knowing that he lives on in my love of cooking, entertaining, and making people happy with food. Thank you, Joe, for being such a great dad. Okay.
And Jonathan?
Dad, where do I even start? You were always a family man, and that was what mattered most to you. Grandma and Papa instilled those values in you, and you passed them down to us. You showed this in countless ways, one of the most meaningful being when you married Mom and took in Jackie and Heather as your own. Even though they weren't technically yours, you loved them as if they were, and then some. Growing up, I always saw how much love and care you poured into making our family strong and close-knit. You were the glue that held us together. Your respect for Mom and the way you treated her, Jackie, Heather, and I, shaped the way that I see relationships. Even when your children, and then in the future, your grandchildren, Natalie and Ronan, gave you no choice but to adore them, you did so with humor and unwavering love. We are the family we are today because of you. You were the foundation and the quiet strength behind everything. From the moment I was born, you made sure I felt like the star of the show. You crafted the most creative birth announcement for me, the catch of the day. You called me, closing with "Mother and family are doing swimmingly." That creativity didn't stop there. You even got me into a commercial about computers, the tagline being, "So easy, a baby can do it." That was just the beginning of your unwavering pride in me. I'll never forget our Friday morning breakfast, as Heather would have, at Nancy's Kitchen, though, for me, in Leisure World, or the bi-weekly pizza trips where we'd grab a whole pizza from Sol d'Italia, drive to our favorite spot with a good view, and sit and talk for hours about anything and everything. Even when Mom would call you after hearing from some of my teachers when she heard I was still not back in class. Those moments were always the highlight of my week, and I never wanted them to end. And then there was the love of technology, something you passed down to me. I remember my science project where we took apart and rebuilt a CPU. Let's be honest, you did most of the rebuilding, but you made sure I learned something along the way. You also made sure to instill your entrepreneurial spirit in me, from creating business cards for my childhood ventures, like snow shoveling and lawn mowing, to strongly encouraging neighbors to hire me for each of those jobs so that I could learn that hard work pays off. You supported my dreams every step of the way. You always supported my wild ideas, and your encouragement is a big reason I've achieved what I have today. You were so much more than just my dad. You were my teacher, my role model, my biggest supporter. I learned so much from you. You taught me how to care deeply for others, how to listen, how to be involved in the lives of those I love. I hope to be as good of a dad one day as you were to Jackie, Heather, and I. You were always there for us. Whether it was playing mini golf upstairs with me, watching and being involved in our after-school activities, or just sitting down to have a conversation, you always made time for your family. Even later in life, when you're diagnosed with MS and face the challenges of your own, you never let that stop you from being present. You would crank the AC down to 60 degrees so you could still play our indoor volleyball games or be a part of whatever crazy thing I had going on at the time. I would watch your card games when your friends would come over to play, and I saw you dominate them from time to time for the first hour, and then lost it all as the game got later into the night. You started to learn to use this to your advantage, however, and after you went up a little bit in money early, you let them know the game could keep going, but you had to call it a night. On another note, when I started my business, you rode along with me for hours as I drove from one potential lead to another, not because you had to, but because you wanted to spend time with me and talk through the journey. You've always been the 1% equity partner in my business, but really you're a 100% partner in everything meaningful in my life. You supported me in everything, from sports to business to life. You came down to New Orleans to take care of me after one of my knee surgeries, sacrificing your own comfort to make sure I could recover. You showed up for me time and time again. Even my unique ventures, you had my back. And when I recently shared my vision for the next chapter of my career, your response, as always, was, "Wow, that's very cool, and even you'll make it happen." You never stopped believing in me. Your strength was unmatched. Even when you were dealt a bad hand and encountered the numerous challenges you faced, you loved life and lived it to the fullest. You taught me that no matter the restrictions or obstacles, there's always a way to find joy and purpose. You were the strongest person I've ever known. You didn't just exist, you thrived, making memories and sharing love every step of the way. You made it a point that you would make it to see Sammy and I get married this past October, no matter what it took. Even staying up late at the wedding and enjoying a few glasses of Crown Royal, his favorite, your favorite. I could do no wrong in your eyes, and that love and support gave me the confidence to face life's challenges. You've always been my role model. Whether it was the keen interest you had in everyone around you, your morals, or even your beard, which I've tried and failed to replicate, you embodied everything I strive to become. A family man, the best father, brother, uncle, nephew, cousin, second cousin, third cousin, just overall family member. And of course, a husband to Mom. Mom and you were a team, and the love you shared for each other set the example for the kind of marriage I have always looked up to and strive to have with Sammy. Your life's work was making people happy, your family, your friends, and anyone lucky enough to know you. That's your legacy. You truly had a heart of gold, the one thing that was working perfectly until the end. You were my hero, Dad. You always will be. Thank you for everything. I love you. Your son, Jonathan. And one last thing I want to say. I know somewhere up there, you were watching the Redskins game this past Sunday, making sure that doinked field goal went in. You had to have one more playoff win on your last day. Thank you.
And we call on Judy.
Joe was the love of my life, my best friend, and my partner in all things. As I was trying to write this eulogy, I struggled with what I wanted to say that would honor Joe's memory because he had so many wonderful qualities, and I wanted to capture them all. You have already heard from my children and grandchildren who spoke of their love for Joe and his love for all of them. Nothing made me happier than to watch Joe quell over our children and grandchildren. He was so proud of them in every way. Joe was unwavering in his commitment to family. He embraced every relationship he ever had and gave it his all. Early in our relationship, I learned what family really meant to Joe. One night he called me and said, "Grandpa wants to go to dinner. I'll pick you up at 6. I had so much work to catch up on that I hesitated, but Joe insisted that we had to be there. When we arrived at the restaurant, there were at least 15 other family members there, Joe's cousins, aunts, and uncles. Everyone dropped what they were doing because Grandpa Sam wanted to have dinner with us. I learned to embrace this family togetherness, and our children grew up in this atmosphere, unaware that this was not the typical way that families operated. As some of you know, Joe struggled with reading all of his life, and until books on tape came out, he didn't read for pleasure. But once he discovered books on tape, he became a voracious reader-listener. He started buying me novels so that I could talk to him about the books and so we could discuss them, or just because he knew I'd like the book. A whole world opened up to him then, and he started thinking about finishing his degree, which he had given up on years ago. When UMUC started online classes, Joe was ready. Me, being the eternal teacher that I am, worked with him through the classes, reading the written materials for him, or just discussing the assignments and helping him study. And at 53 years old, Joe was so proud to have earned his bachelor's degree. Joe had a brilliant mind, light years ahead of many in imagining what could be, especially when it came to technology. Early in 2004, Joe told me that I should put all the data I was collecting for my college consulting business online so others could benefit from it. I had no idea what he was talking about until years later when I started seeing websites pop up, providing information to others. He was an amazing, although unconventional, problem solver. While we were dating, Beatty, Joe's mom, told me that Joe had a habit of taking in wounded birds, and once he nurtured them back to health, they flew away. I assured her that I wasn't going anywhere, and I've kept that promise. Joe and I had a strong bond and a mutual respect for each other. He took care of me when I needed it, and I took care of him when he needed it. It was never a question for either of us. So 4.5 years ago, when Joe became paralyzed, our lives changed forever. But our unwavering love and devotion to each other got even stronger. With everything he had been through, Joe never lost his spirit, his joy in spending time with family and friends, or his strong love to live life to the fullest. Someone once said, "It's not the years in your life that count, it's the life in your years." Joe might have lived a short life, but it was a full life. Soon after he recuperated from his time in the nursing home, he started planning. We rented a handicapped accessible van and went to Rehoboth Beach. When that was a success, Joe thought we should buy a van so he would be able to go places on a regular basis. And we did. We saw Mandy Patinkin at Strathmore and Fiddler on the Roof at the Olney Theater. We met friends for lunch and dinner in lots of different restaurants. Joe even went to a Redskins game with Stuart, his friend of 60 years. We all managed to fly down to New Orleans in 2022 to visit Joe's mother, who was 93 years old at the time. As difficult as this was, we made it happen because we thought it was important that Joe be down there. While we were there, Joe decided he wanted to go out to dinner at his sister and brother-in-law's restaurant in the French Quarter. It's not easy maneuvering a power wheelchair through those streets of Decatur, but Joe was not deterred. He even invited an old friend who lived a couple of hours away to meet us there for dinner. And as an aside, I was feeding Joe at the time he wasn't able to eat, and I ordered a meal with a lot of shrimp pieces in it, and then he said, "That sounds good," and he ordered it also. And I said, "Do you know how many shrimp I have to peel now?" So from then on, I watched what he was ordering, and I made sure mine was different. Speaking of friends, though, once you were Joe's friend, you were his friend for life. I could never figure out how he knew so many people and how he managed to keep up with all of them. But over the years, I came to know them as well. Joe was always generous with friends and loved to surprise people. He never liked doing anything that was expected. He always had his own way of doing something. I'd like to read some excerpts from a eulogy written by Joe's friend, Therese, and they've been friends for 49 years. This is a beautiful tribute, and it's an example of Joe's wonderful, caring nature. So this is from Therese. It was the fall of 1976, my first year at Montgomery College, and I went to sit in the student lounge and heard Billy Joel playing over the speakers. I looked across the room, and I saw this big guy sitting alone at the table, and noticed he was smiling. I sat across from him in another booth saying this was one of my favorite artists, and he smiled and agreed. They were playing the song James by Billy Joel and the Turnstiles. It was the beginning of a music-filled friendship. We became fast friends since that day, sharing our love for folk tunes, artists from the 60s, the up-and-coming 70s tunes. Joe even managed to get us front row seats for Tom Chapin, Janis Ian, and always the folk artists. He loved music. He was a man of a few words then, too. We'd listen for hours without any conversation but our love of the lyrics and sound. All through my college days, we became music buddies, taking long drives, listening to songs, not saying a whole lot, but just being quiet, appreciating the comfort of our own company. In 1977, he gifted me the book by Shel Silverstein, The Giving Tree. He inscribed a few words inside the cover. Be yourself, be like the giving tree. But looking back, that was who Joe was. He was the giving tree. 2 years after we met, I left for James Madison University, working 2 jobs to pay rent and tuition. Joe would drive food down and stock my refrigerator for a month at a time. Of course, it helped that he was in the restaurant business at the time, but I was so grateful to him. Joe was a person who always seemed comfortable to be whoever he was and never pretended to be someone else. He was generous to a fault. Years passed. He married Judy and raised his family, while I married and raised mine. When my marriage fell apart, Joe would drive to my office in Germantown, pick me up in the morning, drive me to the grotto at Mount St. Mary's, and walk with me through the grounds, letting me sit and cry, then take me back to work at the end of the day. He did this for almost a month straight until I gained enough strength to push through. I'm eternally grateful to him, and especially to Judy and the kids, for sharing him with me and my family. Joe didn't just look out for me. He looked out for my whole family, my sisters, my children, and me. He never wavered. He was always there for us. He never judged or tried to fix things. He was my rock and my safe place to fall. As years passed, when Joe could no longer drive, my time with him was often virtual. He would send me songs that he watched on his YouTube clips all day. Sometimes I'd get as many as 50 new artists that he wanted me to hear. This past year, when my family and friends gathered for a music session, I would FaceTime Joe into the practice. He was the best audience, always loving all the songs with all the mistakes and the missed chords, but he still loved it. Joe, you are my giving tree, my confidant, my friend, my safe place to fall. Till we meet again, I am eternally grateful you touched my life. Sorry, I lost a page here. I'm sure those of you who have been friends with Joe for a long time can relate to Teresa's words. Over the years, many of you have shared with me your memories of how you met Joe or a fun activity you did together. Now more than ever, I cherish those memories and have stored them in my mind along with my own memories. To Joe, you are a loving, caring husband, an amazing dad to our children, and papa to our grandchildren, and a good friend to all. I love you so much, and I miss you every day.
We thank everyone in the family for their beautiful words. And we extend our condolences today to Judy, to Joe's children, Jackie, Heather, Jonathan, and Sammy, to his grandchildren, Natalie and Ronan, to his siblings, Sherry, Abby, and Stephen, and to all the extended family. Every week in synagogue on Shabbat, on the Sabbath, we read a portion from the 5 books of Moses, so that over the course of the year we have read through the Torah in its entirety, only to repeat the process year after year. This week, the portion is the first few chapters of the book of Exodus. As the book begins, we're reminded how our patriarch Jacob's family of 70 people ended up in Egypt, and how Joseph, Jacob's son, had risen to power. But now a new Pharaoh has taken over, one that didn't know Joseph. Joseph had interpreted the previous Pharaoh's dream, which foresaw 7 years of famine, and that Pharaoh had appointed Joseph to manage the entire country to ensure that Egypt didn't starve. The Torah tells us that the new Pharaoh had forgotten all about Joseph, and that ignorance leads Pharaoh to deal harshly with the family of Israel and to enslave the Israelite population. Ignorance, according to the story, leads to corruption and disaster. And so, as we mourn our Joseph today, I must admit that I too did not know Joseph. Judy and Joe had been members of Or Kodesh and Chevy Chase for many years, and only joined our synagogue in recent times after this building was built 13 years ago. Tragically, in these past years, the Joe I knew was who I visited in the hospital or at home, confined to a bed, and for most of the time needing respiratory support. The Joseph I encountered was one who was loved and cared for by Judy and the family and diligent nurses and caregivers. But fortunately, I learned of the real Joseph, the Joseph who was the entertainer and chef, the Joseph who would take great pleasure in organizing lavish parties and cooking up a storm for family and friends. I sat with some members of the family yesterday morning and saw pictures of Joe, as we see outside, with hair, and heard stories about the lively, friendly, active, and devoted husband, father, brother, grandfather, cousin, uncle, and friend Joe truly was. Joe was born in D.C. and raised just down the road in Wheaton, where he graduated from Kennedy High School in 1978. He started in the food business, 1974. He started in the food business as a manager of a restaurant and then director of catering at a local hotel. But then he transitioned into tech, where he became a successful owner of a data publishing and exchange company. Though he had transitioned professionally to IT, his love was still food. Joe had a closet full of large, really large serving platters, and I saw one yesterday, for those times he would plan, cook, and serve large family gatherings. Nothing brought him greater pleasure than to bring people together in love and friendship and watch how everyone around him was having a great time. He enjoyed doing all that work, and then, when the party was happening, just standing back and engaging in one-on-one conversations. His love of life and people was contagious, and people have been writing to Judy and the family, people who may have met him many times, how much Joe means to them. Most important for Joe was his family. Though he traveled sometimes for work, he always found time to be with each and every one of his kids and to do something special with each of them. Judy and the kids were the core of his life, and he was so proud of them. And his grandchildren brought added blessing and joy to his life. I know he was so happy to have been able to celebrate Natalie's bat mitzvah last May right here, and Jonathan and Sammy's wedding just a few months ago. For Joe, life revolved around family, and that's how his life ended, at home with his family. As I said, Pharaoh's lack of knowledge of Joseph led eventually to Egypt's downfall. His ignorance led to Egypt being cursed. But our knowledge of our Joseph should only bring us blessing. Reflecting upon his life and how we were touched by his presence in our lives, we pray, should provide us with joy and comfort. Remembering his accomplishments and being reminded of his values will ensure that Joe's memory stays with us and that his legacy will endure as a source of blessing and comfort. Tehi nishmato tzura b'tzura chayim. May Joe's soul be bound in the bond of eternal life. Amen. If you took a program from outside, let's turn inside to Psalm 23 and let's read it together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Before we conclude with the memorial prayer, the El Malei Rachamim, from here we will proceed to Judean Gardens for the burial service. And from there, Shiva, the traditional week of mourning, begins at Judy's home on Cherry Valley Drive. And there will be a minyan, a brief service, every evening at, Shiva is called for 6:30, but the service will be at 7 o'clock tonight and tomorrow night. No service on Friday, and then resuming Saturday, Sunday, and Monday evenings. If we can, we rise for the El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Ametzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShchina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim Etoharim, Kezahar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat, Yosef Shlomo, Ben Ephraim, Ubatya, Shehalach Lolamo, Began Eden Tehei Menuchato, Ana Bal Harachamim, Hastirehu B'Seter Kanafecha Lo'olamim, Utzra B'Tzra Chaim Et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachalato, V'yanuach B'Shalom HaMishkavo, V'namar, Amen. O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of your divine presence, among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament, unto Yosef Shlomo ben Ephraim Ubatya, unto Joseph Bass, who has gone to his eternal home. Author of mercy, bring him under the shelter of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bonds of eternal life. May you be his inheritance, and may his repose be in peace. Amen. People who are asked to be pallbearers, if you come forward. Also, want to ask people to remain in their places until we have